You can tell me I'm
Yes,
wrong.
it's in both, it says.
You have to be in both.
Oh, do you have to be?
Do you have to be in
at the
both?
same time? No, you don't have to be.
The distinction is between Coastal Erosion Area 1 and Coastal Erosion Area 2, or Coastal Inundation 1 and Coastal Inundation 2. So this area of Linwood is Coastal Inundation 2. So
Right.
it's looking out 100 years. It's not looking out 150
Yeah.
years.
No,
So it's not a non-compliant activity.
No. This is an area that floods, so it's perfectly understandable that you would have concern. But I mean, Fiona's just looked at it. It is in the SEMA 1,
Yep.
non-compliant.
So we'll check to see the accuracy.
No.
Cross-section?
Which,
So maybe it's a mapping area, but just regardless, I guess the point I was trying to understand is, because I think it is really important to think about that intensive rezoning and just whether the two are talking to each other now, given decisions are going to be
No,
made.
it's purple. It's this one. Purple, it's the dark purple.
yep.
So it's SEMA 1?
Yes,
Yeah,
it
but
is.
we'll check the accuracy of that, because we are picking up on errors all the time. So what page number, map number?
You're not 39.
39. Yep.
I think it's Bethel's or Jackson's Creek, or there's a creek, streams,
It's not Bells Creek.
Bells Creek could be Bells Creek.
Yep. So as we've said earlier, there's a lot of overlap with the floor level and fill management areas and similar attributes.
So my question is this talking to the residential stage
This area right
1
here, I think.
decisions that have been made through the hearings panel
Don't get up.
around
It does.
areas that get intensified or not?
Yeah, that conversation's been had, and certainly it did inform the intensification provisions of the residential chapter.
Yes, but
for
my
things-
understanding is government are asking us to even intensify even more in some of these areas.
Again, that conversation is being had, and that concern has been taken on board, and certainly some areas that were initially in the draft chapter, residential chapter identified for intensification, were pulled back with this when this information became available.
I'd quite like to get a map of the residential with that, just that overlay, these two overlays on, if that's possible.
I can get that to you.
So that'd be really
Probably not today, though.
interesting. No, not today.
Yeah, no,
but
no,
just-
that's good though.
That'd be really interesting to look at.
Okay, so just drawing your attention again to the table of rules on, start on page 19 and then go to page 20. This slide that you're looking at is referring now to the restrictive controls applying to subdivision and new buildings, and then going on to hazard mitigation works. Less restrictive, we've got a discretionary activity proposed. That status of activity anticipates that activity will go there, but assessment criteria are needed to assess how appropriate it is there. We've got a new definition of coastal hazard mitigation works right at the end of the chapter. So this is a new chapter, and effectively we're recognising that both natural resilience provided by the dune system and physical infrastructure are likely in these areas. They're already there. There's an extensive seawall development around much of the district. In Akaroa Harbour, there's kilometres of it, protecting the roads in particular. We're aware of the seawalls leading from Ferrymead area out to Sumner and the revetment that protects much of the Sumner village. There's also provision for repair and maintenance of existing infrastructure. And as I should have said too, that upgrading or new infrastructure, a discretionary activity. Now these controls have a lot of parallels with what's been agreed through the mediation process and what's the council have put forward as part of a revised first part of the chapter before the hearings panel.
Yep, Phil?
Can I just ask you about on page 19, and that's the coastal erosion and inundation part rules, and there's reference to that when there's a consent application required that will be applied for, that will be required to be undertaken by chartered professional engineers with experience in coastal hazard mitigation. And when I take though into account that when I look at, for example, the presentation we had from Deirdre Hart and other engineers, it just seemed to me, and they said this is how they're doing it, that the interdisciplinary approach actually led to the best results, and that we need to be more across that. So it just seems to me that, and like one of those authors is from NIWA, he's a hydrodynamic scientist. Deirdre Taylor's a coastal specialist, and there are other geological engineers. So it just seems to me that this is in terms of getting the best science and the clearest science, this is pretty restrictive.
A bit narrow, yes.
More than a bit. I mean, and so I just think a broader definition of who we might call on for the best information, something like a recognised physical coastal specialist, or words to that effect, but certainly that it be broadened. And that's with all due respect to engineers who are, obviously would need to be included.
But I'll just emphasise that because the coastal erosion is a topic, it's probably one of the most controversial between scientists and engineers. Fundamentally, we have different approaches at looking at things. An engineer will want to, his remit is normally to design something to have a certain lifetime, etc., whereas the coastal scientists look at the bigger picture and understand what the processes are doing, so that there can be a conflict of interest. So we do have to be careful that, I'm not saying that we want to exclude engineers, it just depends on our strategy, but we need the scientists in at the same time before to understand the big picture and then decide where it's appropriate to do an engineered structure or not.
And that would sound fine, working together in an interesting way because of what specialised part is.
But can I just add that that report would go to the planner, who would then assess that against other information that planner would receive. So what is listed here is simply a technical matter that we need to put in as part of the assessment of that for that particular site. All resource consents, particularly if they are when they're not permitted, when they're restricted, discretionary or discretionary, they weigh various other technical input as well from various other disciplines. And the planner's role is to weigh all of that and to consider all of that.
I'm not convinced that it shouldn't be broader within the district plan.
We can certainly consider that.
We'll come back with some other
you.
wording that would broaden that.
Thank you.
Okay, so have you finished the presentation, or no? A bit more?
They're just more or less sort of saying that, just to remind the councillors and your worship that while this chapter is being prepared, we're awaiting in anticipation that both the natural hazard strategy and the resilience strategy that are being prepared as well, and that there are some resolutions as
presumably one will feed into the other, so the natural hazards will feed into the resilience strategy.
Yes.
Where does this fit with what ECAN announced recently? Because aren't they developing some sort of natural hazards strategy as well?
Yes, Environment Canterbury are leading a regional approach to natural hazards, and that's very appropriate, as we have much the same hazards, especially up and down the coast, as other settlements. But the territorial authorities, and particularly Christchurch being a very large urban area, have specific issues within that regional approach that they must also address. So we're developing the scope for our natural hazards strategy in close consultation with Environment Canterbury.
So our natural hazard strategy will be a component of the regional one as well?
Our natural hazards strategy will be our own, but it will be integrated with the regional one, and it'll also integrate with the regional approach to civil defence and emergency management.
Right.
So we'll integrate with those other strategies and plans and documentation.
I just worry about duplication,
Yeah.
that's all.
There won't be duplication, but there will be. So what we're keen to do is actually leverage off the work that other local authorities are doing.
Right.
But for a city like Christchurch, where we've got intense development close to the coast, we need quite sophisticated management of the coastal hazards, whereas other local authorities don't have that concentration of development so close to the coast.
As you know, I've written to ministers and had a reply in relation to the need for a national policy statement or a environmental standard under the RMA, and unfortunately haven't had the positive feedback that I might have expected. But I kind of would like to know whether, do you think that is that would be helpful for us, because what I worry about is that we end up having an isolated debate in Christchurch about issues in relation to climate change, for example, to coastal erosion, impacts on potential inundation, based on climate change, as if it's a local discussion, but it's not. It's a national conversation that we ought to be having. So I'm looking at the nodding at the end of the table to say that we should continue to pursue the objective of a national. Would it be a national environmental standard or a national policy statement? Which would be the best thing to pursue?
I'm unsure of the best mix of that, but as staff, we've been working closely with staff from Jan Wright's office. So Jan Wright is the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, and she issued a report last year on climate change and sea level rise, and her staff are currently working on a report on coastal hazards and areas that are particularly vulnerable to sea level rise. So we have been obviously talking with them and supplying them with the specific information that we have, and they've been talking to us about the various policy options for approaching this. So we're quite helpful that those issues will be surfaced, and as you said before, sunshine is the best thing, is get all of that information out in the open and get a lot of people debating it on the national stage.
So when is that report due to come out?
I believe later this year, but I'm not certain about that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that would be a great thing, because there's certainly a perception amongst the coastal residents of our city that we are being treated as in isolation from the rest of the country, that no one else, we seem to have the problem, but nowhere else in the country has it.
Oh, well, Kapiti District Council found out that their residents felt exactly the same way, which is why their residents took them to court. And that's why I'm concerned that it's being undertaken in an isolated way or a patchwork way. So we are not the only council that is addressing this, but we are the council that obviously our own residents focus on.
Yes, and as Councillor Clearwater pointed out, we live in a particularly dynamic part of New Zealand, and we've had a major event. So we've had the big shake, and the land settlement that has resulted from that has given us an acceleration almost of 100 years of sea level rise, just over the 2 years of that Canterbury earthquake sequence.
Yeah, I made that point in the long-term plan presentation was,
that's right.
that we have managed to kind of mirror in a matter of seconds the 100-year predictions around sea level rise.
That's right. So the reality of the natural hazards have been thrust upon us in a dramatic way. And indeed, we're still living in a period of heightened seismicity. So all of those things are in our minds when we talk about things like the natural hazard strategy and the resilience strategy.
Yeah. All right. So is that now the end, or we've got?
Yes, it is, until resolutions later, either now or later on.
All right. So what I'd like to do is adjourn the meeting for a quick cup of tea. I'd like to acknowledge the President of Mr. Gaku Hashimoto, a Member of Parliament from Japan, who represents an area which includes our sister city of Kirashiki. So very warm welcome, and we'll join you for a cup of tea.
Good morning.
Right.